Welcome back to Solentha Stories. Let's fuel your day with some intense passion and non-stop excitement. Grab your gear, we're moving into the story now.
On the morning of my birthday, my fiancé texted that he'd been wanting to end things for weeks. I replied, okay, and blocked him even though the timing felt like a slap. I spent the next days holding my head high. Then on day 3 he appeared at my door, shaking, ashamed, desperate, asking for something he never expected I'd refuse. "How are you so calm about this?" Jade asked me over mimosas 3 hours after my fiancé dumped me via text on my 30th birthday. I looked at my best friend across the table at Juliet, at her confused, worried expression, and I realized something. I wasn't calm. I was free. For the first time in 8 months, maybe longer, I wasn't anxious or confused or walking on eggshells around Derek Harrison's unexplained distance. I was just done. Let me explain what happened that morning, and why my immediate response to a devastating breakup text was the single word, okay, followed by blocking him on every platform before my coffee even got cold. I'm Lisa Brennan and I'm very good at planning things. I plan projects at my tech startup job in Austin. I planned our entire October wedding down to the seating chart, which I'd revised 17 times. I planned our future, kids, schools, the kind of parents we'd be. What I didn't plan for was waking up on my milestone birthday to discover that while I'd been planning our life together, Derek had been planning his exit for weeks. The text arrived at 6:23 a.m. 34 words telling me he couldn't do this anymore, that he'd been wanting to end things but didn't know how to tell me that this wasn't working. Not a phone call. Not an in-person conversation. Not even the basic decency to wait until after my actual birthday had passed. Just clinical sentences delivered like he was canceling a service. I was sitting in the condo he'd convinced me to rent 3 years earlier, the expensive 2-bedroom in the Domain with floor-to-ceiling windows that I could barely afford on my salary alone. "Think of it as our place," he'd said during the showing. "We'll be engaged soon anyway." I'd believed him. Signed a lease that stretched my budget to uncomfortable limits. Added his name to the utility accounts even though he kept his own apartment across town, because it made the whole thing feel more real, more permanent. Like we were actually building something together instead of me just overextending myself financially for a promise. That condo became everything to me. My sanctuary. My proof that I'd made it in Austin's competitive tech scene at a relatively young age. I spent every weekend carefully curating it. West Elm furniture, Pottery Barn throw pillows, plants from the farmer's market that I somehow managed to keep alive despite my schedule. Derek would tag along to stores, scrolling through his phone while I agonized over whether the gray sectional or the navy one better matched our aesthetic. Our aesthetic. Looking back now, I'm not even sure Derek had an aesthetic. He'd just nod and say, "Whatever you think is best, babe," while barely glancing up from whatever he was doing on his phone. Every corner of that place held what I'd convinced myself was a meaningful memory. The gray sectional where we'd spent Sunday mornings planning our future. Me with my wedding binder open, him pretending to care about centerpiece options. The kitchen island where he'd made me breakfast exactly once, early in our relationship, pancakes that were somehow both burnt and raw in the middle. I'd eaten them anyway, grateful for the gesture. The bedroom where he'd held me after a brutal day at work and promised me forever in that low, confident voice that made everything seem possible. I'd met Derek 4 years earlier at a networking event downtown. One of those obligatory professional mixers where everyone clutches business cards and cheap wine, desperately trying to make connections that might advance their careers. I was 26, new to Austin's tech scene, wearing a blazer I'd bought specifically for these kinds of events. Derek was 32 then. Sales director at a pharmaceutical company. Tall, with dark hair and premature silver at the temples that made him look distinguished rather than old. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The kind of man who commanded attention when he walked into a room. He approached me at the open bar with what I later realized was a terrible pickup line. Something about my conference badge and how project managers must be good at managing all aspects of life. I should have walked away. Jade would have walked away. But his smile was disarming and I was tired of dating apps that went nowhere, and he seemed genuinely interested when I talked about my work. Our first date was dinner at Uchi. He ordered for both of us without asking. The hamachi with jalapeno, the oak-grilled salmon, the chocolate bomb dessert. Normally, I would have bristled at someone making decisions for me. but somehow he'd guessed exactly what I would have chosen. It felt like synchronicity instead of control. He was attentive without being clingy. Ambitious without being arrogant. Funny without trying too hard. Asked thoughtful questions about my career goals and actually seemed to listen to the answers. On paper, he checked every single box I'd been looking for since moving to Austin after college. The first 3 years were picture perfect in that carefully curated Instagram way. Weekend trips to Fredericksburg wine country, staying at bed and breakfasts that smelled like lavender and old wood, pretending we understood the difference between oaky and fruity wine notes. Holiday parties where we were that couple. Young, successful, attractive, clearly in love. Sunday mornings at Houndstooth Coffee, mapping out our future with the absolute certainty of people who genuinely believed they had everything figured out. We talked about kids constantly. 2, maybe 3. I wanted them before 35 because I'd read all the articles about fertility declining. Derek would nod along, suggesting names, discussing whether we'd send them to public or private schools. Austin public schools were overcrowded, he'd say, so probably private. We'd be the fun parents who prioritized experiences over things. Family trips to national parks. Teaching our children to appreciate nature and culture and all the things our own parents hadn't quite managed. I can't remember now if Derek actually wanted any of that or if he was just reflecting back what he knew I wanted to hear. Sales directors are excellent at reading people, at telling them exactly what they need to hear to close the deal. I was just another transaction apparently. The proposal happened on our 3rd anniversary in Cancun. We'd saved for months for that trip. Or rather, I'd saved while Derek made vague promises about contributing. The beach at sunset. Rose petals scattered across the sand. A mariachi band appearing seemingly out of nowhere, playing romantic songs in Spanish I didn't understand. The whole cinematic production that every woman supposedly dreams about. I cried when he knelt in the sand and pulled out a velvet box containing a 2-carat diamond ring. He told me I was the only woman he'd ever love, that he couldn't imagine his future without me in it. His voice cracked when he said it. I thought that meant it was genuine, that emotional break revealing the depth of his feelings. I said yes before he'd even finished the question. We set a wedding date within a week of getting back to Austin. October seemed perfect. Not too hot, beautiful fall weather. Enough time to plan properly but not so far away that we'd lose momentum. I researched venues obsessively, dragging Derek to tour 6 different options before we finally settled on Barton Creek Resort. It was more expensive than I'd budgeted, but Derek assured me his year-end bonus would cover the difference. I sent save the dates to 150 guests. His pharmaceutical sales colleagues. My startup coworkers. College friends scattered across the country. Relatives who'd have opinions about everything from the color scheme to the menu options. My mother bought her dress within 2 weeks, champagne-colored lace she'd been eyeing at Nordstrom for months. She called me from the dressing room, practically in tears, already imagining herself as mother of the bride. Already thinking about the grandchildren that would surely follow within a year or 2. Derek's parents flew in from Connecticut that July so our families could meet. We had dinner at a steakhouse downtown, one of those overpriced places with dim lighting and leather booths. His father spent the entire meal making thinly veiled criticisms of Texas. Too hot. Too sprawling. Too different from the civilized Northeast. Everyone pretended not to notice the tension, smiling through gritted teeth while his mother tried to smooth things over with small talk about the wedding plans. Everything was falling into place exactly as I'd meticulously planned. I created spreadsheets for the wedding, color-coded vendor contacts, payment schedules, timeline breakdowns with alerts for every deposit deadline. I had the seating chart on a massive poster board in my home office, moving little name cards around like chess pieces because Derek's cousin couldn't sit near Derek's aunt after some family drama at a funeral 3 years ago. I revised that seating chart 17 times. 17. Each time convinced I'd finally found the perfect arrangement that would keep everyone happy, prevent any drama, make our wedding day absolutely flawless. This was supposed to be the culmination of everything I'd worked for. Career success at a competitive startup. A relationship with someone ambitious and established. The kind of life my parents had always wanted for me. Stable, prosperous, better than the one they'd managed to build for themselves. Jade had been skeptical from the beginning, though I'd refused to hear it. Small observations she'd make that I'd immediately dismiss as overprotectiveness. He talks about himself a lot during dinner, she'd mentioned after we'd all gone out for my 28th birthday. Derek had spent 40 minutes describing a particularly difficult sales negotiation while the rest of us just listened. Did you notice he interrupted you 3 times while you were explaining that work project? She'd asked after a double date where I'd been telling her girlfriend about my promotion. I hadn't noticed, but once she pointed it out, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation in my head. Interesting how his card always gets declined when it's his turn to pay, she'd observed when it happened for the 3rd time in as many months. Each time, Derek had a perfectly reasonable explanation. Fraud alert on his account. Left his wallet in his other jacket. Payroll glitch that delayed his direct deposit. I'd covered the bill without complaint because that's what partners do, support each other through minor inconveniences. Jade and I had been roommates at UT Austin. We'd survived terrible professors and worse boyfriends, sorority drama that seemed earth-shattering at the time but feels ridiculous now. We'd stayed close through career changes and her coming out to her conservative parents, and that year I dated a guy who turned out to be married with 2 kids in San Antonio. Her instincts about people were usually razor-sharp. She'd warned me about Marcus, the married guy, 3 weeks before I discovered the truth. But I thought this time she was wrong. Maybe even jealous that I'd found someone serious while she was still casually dating. I chose Derek's reassurances over her warnings, chose to believe his explanations rather than trust my best friend's observations. That choice would haunt me in ways I couldn't have imagined back then, standing in my carefully curated condo with my color-coded wedding spreadsheets and my 2-carat diamond ring, genuinely believing that meticulous planning could guarantee a perfect future. I had no idea that while I was revising seating charts and comparing linen samples, Derek was already planning his exit. That the life I was building on his promises was actually built on absolutely nothing. That in a matter of months I'd wake up on my 30th birthday to a text message that would reduce all of this. The condo, the ring, the spreadsheets, my mother's champagne lace dress, those 17 seating chart revisions, to nothing. But sitting there at Juliet with Jade 3 hours after that text arrived, watching her worry about whether I was about to have a delayed breakdown, I understood something I couldn't have articulated before. I'd been performing a version of happiness for so long that I'd forgotten what the real thing felt like. And the moment Derek's cowardice freed me from that performance, I could finally breathe again. But I hadn't been breathing properly for months before that text arrived. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. 8 months before my 30th birthday, right around the time we'd finalized the venue deposit and sent out save the dates, Derek started changing in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. Small shifts at first, easy to rationalize away when you're desperate to believe everything's fine. He'd come home from work later and later. 7 became 8 became 9:30, sometimes even 10. Big deal closing, he'd say, dropping his keys on the kitchen counter without making eye contact. Client dinner ran long. You know how it is. I'd nod, reheat whatever I'd made for dinner, try not to feel hurt that he hadn't texted to let me know he'd be late. The thing was, Derek had always been chatty about his work. Annoyingly so, honestly. He'd walk through the door and immediately launch into detailed play-by-plays of his day. Entire sales pitches reenacted with different voices for different clients, celebrating every closed deal like it was a personal victory over the universe itself. I'd learned more about pharmaceutical sales strategies than I'd ever wanted to know, just from listening to him narrate his wins over dinner. But suddenly nothing. When I'd ask about his day, he'd give me vague non-answers. Same old stuff, you know how sales is. That was it. No details. No stories. No enthusiasm. Just exhaustion and irritation if I pressed for more. Why do you need a play-by-play? He snapped one evening when I'd asked about a major account he'd been pursuing for weeks. Can't I just decompress without being interrogated? Interrogated. That's the word he used. Like asking my fiancé about his day was some kind of hostile cross-examination instead of basic relationship conversation. I tried to give him space. Convinced myself this was normal pre-wedding stress, that everyone got overwhelmed planning a major life event. But the distance kept growing and I felt like I was losing him even though he still slept beside me every night. Then came the gym obsession. Derek had always been casually fit, played pickup basketball on weekends, went for runs occasionally. But around the same time he started coming home late, he suddenly became fixated on working out. 5 days a week at 6 a.m., sometimes stopping for a second session after work. He'd come home drenched in sweat, muscles I'd never noticed before suddenly defined under his t-shirts. "You're looking really good," I told him one morning, trying to find something positive to comment on when everything else felt wrong. He shrugged without looking at me. "Just trying to look decent in the wedding photos." But there was something performative about the whole thing. He bought new cologne. Expensive, sophisticated stuff I'd never smelled before, nothing like the familiar scent I associated with him. Started wearing tighter shirts that showed off his newly sculpted arms. He'd check himself in every reflective surface: store windows, his phone screen, the rearview mirror at stoplights. Not the casual glances everyone does, but deliberate assessments, adjusting his hair, his collar, his expression. One Saturday morning I suggested we work out together like we used to. We'd gone to yoga classes together early in our relationship, made it our thing before Sunday coffee. "My training schedule's pretty intense right now," he said, lacing up his running shoes without looking at me. "You probably couldn't keep up." The rejection stung more than it should have. Not because I cared about keeping up with his workouts, but because of how casually he'd dismissed me. Like I was an inconvenience he was managing rather than his future wife trying to spend time with him. He wasn't getting fit for our wedding photos. Deep down I knew that. He was getting fit for someone else's attention. But I couldn't face that reality, not with the venue booked and the dress ordered and my mother already planning what she'd say in her Mother of the Bride speech. The phone thing was worse. Derek had always been casually open with his devices. We'd known each other's passcodes since the beginning. Would use whichever phone was closer to check the weather or Google something or respond to a text. I'd read him funny messages from Jade. He'd show me ridiculous memes from his college friends. Around 6 months before my birthday that stopped completely. He changed his password without mentioning it. I discovered this accidentally when I picked up his phone to check the time and it demanded a passcode I didn't know. When I asked about it later he got defensive. My company's implementing new security protocols. I have work emails on there. A reasonable explanation. Except he started keeping his phone face down constantly. Would physically leave rooms to take calls. His phone would buzz during dinner and he'd glance at it, expression flickering with something I couldn't read, then silence it without explanation. One evening I picked up his phone to check the weather. A storm was coming and I wanted to know if I should close the balcony doors. He practically lunged across the couch to grab it from me. "Why do you need access to my phone?" His voice was sharp, almost aggressive. "Don't you trust me?" That reaction felt like an admission of guilt. I stood there holding my own phone, staring at him, trying to understand when basic trust had become this complicated. "I was just checking the weather, Derek. Use your own phone." He turned away, typing something quickly before locking the screen again. His lock screen had changed too. Used to be a photo of us from Cancun, the beach at sunset, both of us laughing. Now it was some generic mountain landscape. When I asked about it, he said he wanted something less distracting. Less distracting than a photo of his fiancé. Right. I swallowed my suspicions because we were 4 months from getting married and I had to trust him. Had to. The alternative was too terrifying, that I'd wasted 4 years on someone who was lying to me, that I'd have to cancel a wedding and face everyone's questions and admit that Jade had been right all along. But trust was becoming exhausting. Every day I'd wake up and actively choose to ignore the evidence mounting in front of me. The late nights. The phone secrecy. The emotional distance. I was performing trust, not actually feeling it. Our physical intimacy evaporated around the same time. We'd always been affectionate. Not overly demonstrative in public but connected. Comfortable. We'd fall asleep tangled together, wake up reaching for each other. That all stopped. Gradually at first, then completely. We went from sleeping intertwined to maintaining careful distance on opposite sides of the bed. When I'd try to initiate anything, even just cuddling, he'd claim exhaustion. Work stress. The pressure of wedding planning. "It's a lot, Lisa. Can you just give me some space?" I tried to be understanding. Everyone handles stress differently. Maybe he was one of those people who needed physical distance when feeling overwhelmed. I'd read articles about it, convinced myself this was normal. But it didn't feel normal. It felt like he was physically present while emotionally checked out, going through the motions of a relationship without actually being in one. We'd sit on opposite ends of the couch watching Netflix in silence, the space between us feeling wider than the few feet it actually was. He started coming to bed after I was already asleep. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and he'd be on his laptop in the living room, claiming he couldn't sleep and didn't want to disturb me with his restlessness. One night I found him sleeping on the couch entirely, still in his work clothes from the day before. "Why didn't you come to bed?" I asked the next morning. "Didn't want to wake you with my tossing and turning." He didn't even look up from his phone. I wanted to confront him. Wanted to demand real answers instead of these dismissive explanations that explained nothing. But I was terrified of what those answers might be. Terrified that if I pushed too hard, he'd confirm what some part of me already knew, that he was done with us, just hadn't figured out how to say it yet. So I did what I'd been doing for months. I focused on wedding planning instead. Threw myself into the details with almost manic intensity. Revised the seating chart for the 14th time. Researched centerpiece options. Scheduled cake tastings that Derek would inevitably be too busy to attend. I convinced myself that once we got through the stress of the wedding itself, everything would go back to normal. That this distance was temporary, just pre-wedding jitters amplified by work pressure and the weight of a major life commitment. I needed to believe that. Because the alternative, that the man I was planning to marry had already left me emotionally and was just waiting for the right moment to make it official, that was too devastating to face. So I didn't face it. I just kept planning, kept pretending, kept performing the role of the happy bride-to-be while my relationship crumbled around me in ways I refused to acknowledge. Until the morning he stopped pretending entirely and sent me that text. But pretending gets harder when the evidence becomes impossible to ignore. 3 months before my birthday, I had a final venue walkthrough scheduled at Barton Creek Resort. These walkthroughs were standard. The coordinator wanted to finalize menu selections, confirm the layout, discuss last-minute details. Derek had promised he'd be there. It was important, I told him. We needed to make decisions together. Jade came with me for moral support. She'd been my unofficial wedding planner, helping me stay organized when the details felt overwhelming. We arrived 15 minutes early, both of us dressed professionally because I wanted the venue staff to take us seriously. Derek was supposed to meet us at 2. By 2:15 he still hadn't shown up. I texted him. No response. Called twice. Straight to voicemail. The coordinator, a woman named Michelle with a patient smile and a tablet full of notes, suggested we start without him. "He can catch up when he arrives," she said diplomatically. We walked through the ceremony space. Beautiful oak trees, natural lighting, exactly what I'd envisioned. Michelle showed us where the chairs would be arranged, where the string quartet would set up, where Derek and I would stand during our vows. I tried to focus, tried to picture the moment, but all I could think about was the empty space beside me where my fiancé should have been. Derek finally showed up at 2:45. Didn't apologize. Didn't explain. Just walked up to where we were standing in the reception hall, phone in his hand, barely making eye contact. "Sorry," he muttered. "Not sorry for being late. Just sorry, generic and meaningless." Michelle, to her credit, didn't miss a beat. She continued her presentation, showing us the reception space, discussing table arrangements, explaining how the evening would flow. "So for your first dance you'll enter from here and the DJ will be set up over there. We can adjust the lighting to create whatever ambience you're looking for." Derek didn't even glance at the space she was indicating. He was scrolling through something on his phone, thumb moving rapidly across the screen. "Derek," I said quietly. "Did you hear that?" Hum. He didn't look up. Michelle asked about menu preferences. We'd narrowed it down to 3 options: chicken, beef, or salmon as the main entrees. She needed our final decision today. "What do you think?" I asked Derek, trying to include him, trying to make this feel like a joint decision. "Whatever you want." Still looking at his phone. "But what do you prefer?" "Doesn't matter." His tone was flat, dismissive. "You're better at this stuff." Jade shot me a look. I ignored it. Michelle walked us through the cocktail hour setup, the bar options, the timeline for toasts. Derek gave one-word responses when directly asked questions: "Fine, sure, whatever," without ever actually engaging. When Michelle showed us the exact spot where we'd have our first dance as husband and wife, Derek didn't even pretend to be interested. Just stood there, phone in hand, physically present but mentally somewhere else entirely. The walkthrough lasted 90 minutes. Derek spent probably 85 of those minutes on his phone. Afterward, in the parking lot, Jade pulled me aside before Derek reached his car. Her face was tight with barely controlled anger. "Lisa, what the hell is going on with him?" "He's just stressed about work." "No. He cut me off. That wasn't stress. He acted like he'd rather be anywhere else. Like this wedding is some obligation he's dreading instead of something he's excited about. I didn't have a good answer. Couldn't defend him because she was right. That night I confronted Derek in our condo. He'd gone straight home after the walkthrough, hadn't said a word to me in the parking lot, just gotten in his car and left. We need to talk about today, I said. He was sitting on the couch, predictably on his phone. What about it? You were barely there. You showed up late, you were on your phone the entire time, you didn't engage with any of the decisions. I was there, wasn't I? He finally looked up, but his expression was defensive, almost hostile. What more do you want? I showed up to your venue thing. I answered questions when asked. What else am I supposed to do? It's our venue thing, Derek. Our wedding. And you could have acted like you cared even a little bit. I'm dealing with a lot at work right now, Lisa. I can't just drop everything because you need me to fawn over table arrangements. I'm not asking you to fawn. I'm asking you to participate. This is supposed to be our day. Your day. He stood up, walking toward the kitchen. Let's be honest. This whole wedding is what you want. You picked the venue. You picked the colors. You picked everything. I'm just the guy who shows up and says, I do. That stung more than anything he'd said in months. If that's how you feel, maybe we shouldn't be getting married. I said it as a challenge, expecting him to backtrack, to reassure me, to say he didn't mean it. Dad, he just shrugged. Maybe we shouldn't. The silence that followed was deafening. We stood there, maybe 10 feet apart, and I waited for him to take it back. To say he was stressed and didn't mean it, and of course he wanted to marry me. He didn't say anything. After a long moment he grabbed his keys. I need some air. I'll be back later. He didn't come back until after midnight. I was in bed pretending to sleep when I heard him come in, heard him pause in the doorway of our bedroom, heard him sigh before heading to the couch. The next morning he acted like the conversation had never happened. Made coffee, got ready for work, kissed my forehead on his way out like we were fine. But we weren't fine. We were falling apart, and I was the only one pretending we could still fix it. The week before my birthday, Derek's behavior shifted into something even stranger. He became almost manic, jumpy, distracted, like he was waiting for something to happen. He'd start sentences and trail off mid-thought. We should probably, never mind. I've been thinking about, it's not important. He'd stare at his phone with this intense focus, then quickly lock the screen whenever I walked into the room. Not subtle about it. Just blatant enough that I knew he was hiding something but couldn't prove what. He kept making cryptic comments that I stupidly misinterpreted as being about wedding planning. We need to talk after your birthday, he said one evening while we were eating dinner in silence. Hey. About what? Just things we should discuss. Soon. Like the honeymoon reservations? Because we really do need to finalize those. Sure. Yeah. That. But his expression said it wasn't about honeymoon reservations at all. Looking back now, I can see exactly what he was doing. He was building an exit strategy. Counting down the days until my birthday, when he'd decided he'd finally unload the burden of our relationship. He was torturing himself with guilt. I could see it in his restless energy, his inability to maintain eye contact, the way he'd sometimes look at me with something that looked almost like regret. But not enough guilt to be honest with me. Not enough guilt to have one difficult conversation like an adult instead of stringing me along until the most hurtful moment possible. April 17th. The night before my 30th birthday. I'd taken the afternoon off work to get my nails done, pick up the dry cleaning, buy ingredients for the dinner I was planning to make. I'd assumed we'd spend the evening together, maybe have a quiet celebration before my actual birthday the next day. Around 6, Derek texted, "Have to work late. Big presentation tomorrow. Sorry babe. I'll make it up to you on your birthday. Promise." I believed him. I'd believed that excuse dozens of times before. Why would this time be different? I ordered Thai food from our usual place. Pad cew and spring rolls, the same order we always got. Ate alone on the couch with Miso curled up beside me, her purring the only sound in the too quiet condo. Watched some reality show I wasn't actually paying attention to. Tried not to feel sorry for myself for spending the night before my milestone birthday alone. I went to bed around 11. Disappointed but understanding. Telling myself that tomorrow would be better. That he'd make it up to me with some grand gesture, some sign that he still cared about us. I fell asleep imagining him surprising me with breakfast in bed. Or taking the day off work to spend it with me. Or finally having a real conversation about what had been wrong between us for months, reassuring me that we'd get through this rough patch. I had no idea that while I was falling asleep in our bed, while I was giving him the benefit of the doubt one more time, he was probably with someone else. Building up the courage to end everything via text message. Deciding that my birthday morning would be the perfect time to detonate 4 years of my life. Throughout those 8 months of distance and lies, there had been dozens of small moments I'd rationalized away. Evidence I'd convinced myself didn't mean what it obviously meant. The receipt I'd found in his jacket pocket for a dinner at a Chico. Expensive, romantic, a restaurant we'd never been to together. When I'd asked about it, he'd said it was a client dinner. I'd accepted that even though the receipt showed only 2 entrees. The late-night phone calls I'd hear through the bathroom door, his voice low and intimate in a way he hadn't spoken to me in months. When I'd asked who he was talking to, he'd said his brother in Connecticut. I'd accepted that even though the calls happened multiple times a week and Derek had never been particularly close with his brother. The text preview I'd seen flash across his phone screen from a contact labeled, Ashley W. Just 3 words visible before the notification disappeared. Can't wait to see you again. Who's Ashley W? I'd asked casually, my heart pounding. Work colleague, he'd said without hesitation. About a team meeting next week. I'd wanted to believe him so badly that I'd accepted the lie. Because questioning it meant facing possibilities I wasn't ready to face. It meant admitting that I'd wasted 4 years. That Jade had been right all along. That I'd have to cancel a wedding and face everyone's questions and pity. So I rationalized. Made excuses. Convinced myself that these small things didn't add up to what they clearly added up to. That's how people trap themselves. One rationalization at a time until you're so deep you can't see the way out anymore. Until someone forces you out with 34 words at 6:23 in the morning on your birthday. Those 34 words were waiting for me when I woke up. April 18th. My 30th birthday. I opened my eyes at 6:45 a.m. and the first thing I did, like every morning, was reach for my phone on the nightstand. The screen showed several notifications. My mother probably. My sister. Maybe some college friends remembering the date. Instead there was a text from Derek. Sent at 6:23 a.m. 22 minutes ago, while I'd still been asleep. I sat up in bed, already feeling that familiar tightness in my chest that had become my constant companion over the past few months. Whatever this message said, I knew it wouldn't be good. Derek didn't send early morning texts unless something was wrong. I opened it. Asterisk, Lisa, I can't do this anymore. I've been wanting to end things for weeks but didn't know how to tell you. This isn't working and I don't think we should get married. You deserve someone who's all in and I'm not. I'm sorry this is over text, but I thought it would be easier for both of us. Take care. Sis. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time because surely I was misreading something. Surely those words didn't actually say what I thought they said. But they did. 34 words. I counted them later, though I don't know why I bothered. 4 years together. 1 year engaged. A $15,000 non-refundable venue deposit. Save the date sent to 150 guests. A custom Vera Wang dress hanging in my closet. My mother's champagne lace dress hanging in hers. His parents who'd flown in from Connecticut to meet my family. Spreadsheets. Seating charts revised 17 times. Vendor contracts. Menu tastings. Everything I'd spent months meticulously planning. All of it reduced to a text message sent at 6:23 in the morning on my 30th birthday. Not a phone call. Not an in-person conversation where he'd at least have to look me in the eye. Not even the basic decency of waiting until after my birthday had passed, giving me one last day before destroying everything. Just 34 clinical words delivered like he was canceling a streaming subscription. I'm sorry this is over text, but I thought it would be easier for both of us. Easier for him, he meant. Easier to be a coward. Easier to avoid seeing the devastation on my face, hearing the hurt in my voice, facing the consequences of what he was doing. I sat there in bed, phone in my hand, and waited for the breakdown. Waited for the tears, the screaming, the collapse into grief that seemed appropriate for having your entire future obliterated before you've even had your morning coffee. It didn't come. Instead, I felt something completely unexpected. Clarity. All those months of distance suddenly made perfect sense. The late nights had never been about work. The gym obsession had never been about looking good in wedding photos. The phone secrecy had never been about privacy or work security protocols. He'd been checking out of our relationship for months, probably already involved with someone else, and he just hadn't had the spine to admit it until he'd built enough distance to make his escape. The birthday timing wasn't thoughtless. It was calculated. He'd been planning this, waiting for this exact moment. He wanted me too devastated to fight back, too humiliated to show up at his apartment demanding real answers, too shattered to do anything except absorb the blow and disappear quietly from his life. He'd been a coward from the very beginning. I'd just been too invested in my carefully planned future to see it. I got out of bed, walked to the kitchen, made coffee in my boss lady mug, the one Jade had given me when I got my promotion 2 years ago. My hands were steady as I measured the grounds, added water, pressed the button. The familiar ritual was grounding, something normal in a morning that had just become anything but. While the coffee brewed, I read the text again. Analyzed it the way I'd analyze a project plan at work, looking for the logic, the structure, the real meaning beneath the corporate speak. I've been wanting to end things for weeks. Weeks. Not days. Not a sudden realization. Weeks of knowing he was done with us while still sleeping in our bed, still letting me plan our wedding, still allowing me to believe we had a future together. You deserve someone who's all in and I'm not. Classic deflection. Making it about what I deserved rather than owning his choices. Making himself sound noble instead of cowardly. I thought it would be easier for both of us. The only honest line in the entire message. He absolutely thought this would be easier, for him. Sending a text meant he didn't have to witness my pain. Didn't have to answer difficult questions. Didn't have to face the reality of what he was doing to someone who'd loved him for 4 years. My coffee finished brewing. I poured it slowly, added cream, stirred. Took a sip. It was good, strong, exactly how I needed it. Then I picked up my phone and typed one word, okay. Hit send. Then I blocked his number. Opened Instagram. Blocked him there too. Facebook. Blocked. LinkedIn. Blocked. Every social media platform we'd ever connected on, every digital thread that tied us together. I severed them all methodically, one after another, while I stood in my kitchen drinking coffee and watching the Austin sunrise through those floor-to-ceiling windows he'd convinced me I needed. I went to my photos. Started deleting. Every picture of us together, every screenshot of sweet text conversations, every saved memory from 4 years of a relationship that had apparently meant nothing to him. Hundreds of photos. I deleted them all. My emergency contacts. His name was right there under Fiancé. I'd changed it from Derek after the proposal, thinking it was romantic. I deleted the entire entry. The whole digital erasure took maybe 10 minutes. Clinical. Efficient. Thorough. By the time I finished my first cup of coffee, Derek Harrison had been completely removed from my digital life. My phone started ringing immediately. Unknown number. I declined the call. It rang again. Different unknown number. Declined. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Lisa, please pick up, it's Derek, please, we need to talk. Walked. Another call. Another decline. He was calling from work phones, friends' phones, probably standing in his apartment frantically borrowing devices from anyone nearby because I'd blocked his number and he hadn't expected that. Hadn't expected me to respond at all, let alone respond with immediate, final dismissal. He'd expected me to fall apart. To call him sobbing, begging for an explanation, for another chance, for anything that would make this hurt less. He'd expected me to need closure, to need him to explain himself, to need some kind of emotional processing that would require his participation. Instead, I'd given him one word and then erased him completely. The calls kept coming. I declined every single one. Made myself a second cup of coffee. Sat on my gray sectional couch, the one I'd agonized over choosing, the one Derek had barely looked at before saying, whatever you think is best, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness. Not relief exactly. Peace. The constant anxiety I'd been carrying, the walking on eggshells, the daily mental gymnastics of trying to figure out what was wrong and how to fix it, all of it was just gone. He'd made his choice. I'd accepted it immediately. We were done. My phone buzzed with another text from another unknown number. You can't just ignore me, we need to talk about this like adults, this is childish. I almost laughed. He'd dumped me via text on my birthday morning and I was being childish for not engaging with his panic. I blocked that number too. Around 7:30 Jade called. Her name on my screen felt like a lifeline. Happy birthday, beautiful. Her voice was so cheerful, so oblivious to what had just happened. You ready for brunch? I'm thinking mimosas and... Thanks. Change of plans. Derek and I broke up. Silence. Then, what? What the hell happened? About an hour ago. He sent me a breakup text. On my birthday. I heard her sharp intake of breath. That piece of, are you okay? Do you want me to come over? I can be there in 20 minutes. I'm okay. And I was. Actually, I think I'm better than okay. Can we still do brunch? I don't want to sit here alone. Absolutely. I'll pick you up in an hour. And Lisa? Her voice was fierce, protective. I'm bringing mimosas. Strong ones. After we hung up, I sat there for another moment holding my phone, looking around the condo I could barely afford alone. The condo Derek had convinced me to rent. The sanctuary I'd built believing we'd share it together. It was just mine now. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead it felt like freedom. I finished my coffee. Got up. Walked to the bathroom. Started getting ready for brunch with my best friend for the first day of my 30th year for whatever came next. Derek Harrison had tried to destroy my birthday, my future, my carefully constructed plans. But standing there in front of my bathroom mirror, mascara in hand, I realized something he hadn't counted on. That one word, okay, hadn't been acceptance of defeat. It had been a declaration of war. Not that Derek would ever see that declaration. I got dressed for work with the same methodical precision I applied to everything else in my life. Navy blazer. White blouse. My favorite heels. The ones that made me feel powerful even on terrible days. I did my makeup carefully, taking extra time with concealer to hide the slight puffiness around my eyes. Not from crying. Just from not sleeping well. By the time I walked out of my condo at 8:15, I looked exactly like I always did. Professional. Put together. Completely fine. The office was its usual Tuesday chaos. I arrived to 17 new emails, 3 Slack messages about an urgent project issue, and a calendar reminder that our morning stand-up started in 10 minutes. I dove into it all, grateful for the distraction. Morning, Lisa. My coworker Brian called out as I walked past his desk. Happy birthday. Thanks, Brian. I smiled. Kept walking. The stand-up meeting was in our main conference room. 12 people gathered around the table, laptops open, coffee mugs scattered everywhere. Our team lead went around the circle asking for updates. When it was my turn, I gave my status report clearly and concisely. 3 projects on track. 1 potential risk we were monitoring. No blockers. Professional. Composed. Normal. Oh, and happy birthday, Lisa. My team lead added at the end. 30's a big one. Thank you. Another smile. This one felt more natural. I was getting better at this performance. At 10:30 my boss stopped by my desk. Sarah was in her mid-40s, sharp, direct, the kind of manager who actually cared about her team beyond just their output. Happy birthday, she said, handing me a gift card. I know you're always working on that condo of yours. Thought this might help. Anthropology. $75. Way more generous than the standard birthday gift card most managers gave. Sarah, this is so thoughtful. Thank you. You doing anything special tonight? Big celebration plans. For a split second I considered telling her. Just blurting out that my fiancé had dumped me via text this morning and I had absolutely no plans except maybe drinking wine alone in my condo while I figured out how to cancel a wedding. Instead I said, just dinner with some friends. Nothing too crazy. Well, enjoy. And seriously, take the afternoon off if you want. It's your birthday. I'm good. Actually, work is a nice distraction right now. She gave me a look. The kind that said she knew something was off but wasn't going to push. Hey. But if you need anything, my door's open. Lunch was the hardest part. Our office manager, Kelly, had brought in cupcakes. She'd made a whole thing of it, setting them up in the break room with little birthday decorations and a card that everyone had signed. At 12:15 someone announced loudly, birthday celebration in the break room. Come sing to Lisa. I walked in to find maybe 20 co-workers gathered around the cupcakes, Kelly holding a lighter ready to light the single candle she'd stuck in one of them. They sang. I stood there smiling, feeling completely detached from my body like I was watching this happen to someone else. When they finished, everyone clapped. I blew out the candle. Make a wish, someone called out. I wish Derek Harrison gets exactly what he deserves, I thought. But I just smiled and said, already did. People hugged me, told me to enjoy my 30s. Asked about the wedding, only a few more months, right? You must be so excited. I deflected, changed the subject. Made it through the entire awkward performance without breaking. My assistant, Rachel, lingered after everyone else had returned to their desks. She was younger than me, mid-20s, smart, perceptive. You okay? She asked quietly. Yeah. Why? I don't know. You just seem off. Like you're here but not really here. Just tired. Wedding planning is exhausting. The lie came easily now. Hey. Well, if you need anything. I'm fine. Really. But thanks, Rachel. She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. I made it through the rest of the day. Answered emails. Attended meetings. Participated in discussions about project timelines and resource allocation. Did my job like my entire world hadn't just exploded. At 5:30 I shut down my laptop, grabbed my purse and walked to my car. Only when I was alone, sitting in the parking garage with the door closed and the engine running, did I let myself breathe. Jade picked me up at 9 a.m. I'd texted her my address the night before, though she already knew it. She'd been to my condo dozens of times. She showed up with 2 travel cups of mimosas and a fierce expression that said she was ready to commit violence on my behalf if necessary. How are you really doing? She asked the moment I got in her car. Honestly, I don't know. I feel like I should be more devastated than I am. There's no should in this situation. You feel however you feel. We drove to Juliet, one of our favorite brunch spots. Got a table by the window. Ordered Italian omelets and bottomless mimosas and sat there for 2 hours while I told her everything. The 8 months of distance. The venue walkthrough where Derek couldn't be bothered to look up from his phone. The cryptic comments the week before my birthday. The text itself, 34 words at 6:23 in the morning. Jade listened without interrupting, her jaw getting tighter with every detail. He's been planning this, she finally said. This wasn't some impulsive decision made in a moment of panic. He's been cultivating an exit strategy for months. Probably has someone else already lined up. Maybe. I took a long sip of my mimosa. Honestly, I don't even care anymore. If he's that much of a coward, if he's capable of doing this, then I dodged a bullet. Jade raised her glass. To dodging bullets and thriving without dead weight. We clinked glasses. For the first time since opening that text, I felt something other than numb shock or cold clarity. I felt almost free. You know what the worst part is? I said. I'm not even heartbroken about losing him. I'm angry about the time I wasted. 4 years of my life invested in someone who was apparently just going through the motions. He's the one who wasted his time, Jade said fiercely. He had something real with someone amazing and he threw it away because he's a coward who can't handle commitment. That's on him, not you. We stayed at Juliet until they started giving us looks about needing the table. Then we went back to my condo and Jade helped me start the process of erasing Derek from my space. Saturday morning. Day 2, I woke up to my phone vibrating constantly on the nightstand. 23 missed calls. 47 text messages. All from numbers I didn't recognize. I checked one voicemail at random. Derek's voice, shaking, almost unrecognizable. Lisa, please pick up. I made a huge mistake. I don't know what I was thinking. Can we please just talk? Please. I'm begging you. Just 5 minutes. Please. I deleted it. Didn't bother listening to the others. Scrolled through a few text messages. All variations of the same desperate theme. I messed up so badly. We need to talk about this. You can't just ignore me. This is childish. Lisa, be an adult. That last one almost made me laugh. He dumped me via text on my birthday morning, but I was being childish for not engaging with his panic. I blocked each new number as they appeared. Then I got up, made coffee, and decided what I was going to do with my Saturday. I was going to reclaim my space. First, I took down every photo of us. There were more than I'd realized. Framed pictures on the bookshelf, the magnetic ones on the fridge, the canvas print above the couch that I'd had made from our Cancun proposal. I pulled them all down, removed the photos, and stacked the empty frames in a box. Then I went through the condo collecting everything Derek had ever given me. Birthday presents. Christmas gifts. The weighted blanket he'd bought when I mentioned having trouble sleeping. The coffee table book about architecture that I'd never read. All of it went into boxes. I rearranged the furniture. The couch moved to a different wall. The bookshelf to where the couch had been. The accent chair that Derek had claimed as his spot went into the spare bedroom. By noon the place looked completely different. Felt different too. Finally actually mine. Jade showed up around 1 with wine and painting supplies. "I brought emerald green," she announced, holding up a gallon of paint. "For your bedroom accent wall." The one Derek said was too bold. I'd wanted to paint that wall for over a year. Derek had insisted we keep it the boring beige that had come with the place. "It's neutral," he'd said. "We don't want to alienate potential buyers when we eventually sell. Except this was my condo. Not ours. And I could paint it whatever color I wanted." "New era, new energy," Jade declared, roller in hand. We spent the afternoon painting. Jade told me about her new girlfriend, Kelly, who she'd been seeing for about a month. I told her about the project from hell at work. We gossiped about mutual friends. Drank wine. Laughed. By the time the sun started setting, that accent wall was a gorgeous, bold emerald green. The kind of color that made a statement. The kind of color that said this space belonged to someone who knew what she wanted. Sunday morning, day 3, I woke up feeling genuinely good for the first time in months. Then my doorbell rang at 9 a.m. I looked through the peephole. Derek was standing in the hallway looking like he hadn't slept in 3 days. His hair was greasy and unwashed. His eyes were bloodshot and swollen. He was wearing the same button-down I'd seen in his LinkedIn profile picture from Friday, wrinkled now like he'd slept in it. He was holding a bouquet of carnations. Sad, wilting grocery store carnations that were already browning at the edges. I didn't open the door. He knocked. "Lisa, I know you're home. Your car's in the lot. Please, can we just talk? 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I stood silently behind the door watching him through the peephole. "I made a mistake, okay? The biggest mistake of my life. I panicked about the wedding and instead of talking to you about it, I blew everything up. But I love you. We can fix this. Please." Miso meowed from somewhere behind me. Derek's head jerked up at the sound. "I can hear Miso. Come on, Lisa. Don't make me beg through a door." I didn't move. Didn't make a sound. He knocked again. Called my name. His voice cracked. "Please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Just open the door." He waited. 10 minutes. 15. Knocking periodically. Calling my name. His voice getting more desperate, more broken. Finally, he slid down against the doorframe and just sat there, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. I watched him fall apart through the peephole for 20 minutes. Watched him cry. Watched him break. And I felt absolutely nothing. Eventually he stood up. Left the carnations on my doormat. Walked away. I waited until I heard the elevator doors close. Then I opened my door, picked up the sad, wilting flowers, and walked directly to the trash chute at the end of the hallway. Dropped them in. Listened to them tumble down 6 floors to the dumpster below. Went back to my condo. Closed the door. Locked it with the new locks I'd had installed yesterday. Made coffee. Sat on my couch. Looked at my beautiful emerald green accent wall. That silence. Choosing not to open the door, not to engage, not to give him the confrontation or closure he clearly needed. That was more powerful than anything I could have said. And Derek apparently couldn't handle silence. Monday morning arrived with the false promise of normalcy. I got to work at my usual time, settled into my desk with my coffee, opened my laptop to check emails. Rachel appeared at my office door before I'd even gotten through my inbox. She looked uncomfortable. More uncomfortable than I'd ever seen her. "There's a Derek Harrison here to see you?" Her voice went up at the end, making it a question even though it shouldn't have been. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he's insisting it's urgent. He says it's personal." My stomach dropped. But my voice stayed completely steady when I said, "Tell him I'm unavailable. If he tries to come back, call building security." Rachel's eyebrows shot up. She'd met Derek at the company Christmas party last year. Had chatted with him about his pharmaceutical sales job. Knew he was my fiancé. "Got it," she said quietly and left. I tried to focus on my emails. Read the same sentence 3 times without processing it. My hands were shaking slightly. I pressed them flat against my desk. 10 minutes later Rachel was back. Her voice was lower now, urgent. He's refusing to leave the lobby. He's getting loud with the receptionist. Jen asked him to leave and he said he's not going anywhere until he talks to you. Should I call security? Yes, please. She disappeared again. I stood up, walked to my office window. I was on the 3rd floor overlooking the main entrance. From here I could see the lobby entrance clearly. Within 2 minutes, 2 security guards in their navy uniforms appeared. One was speaking into his radio. The other was approaching someone I couldn't quite see yet. Then Derek came into view and I barely recognized him. He looked worse than he had Sunday morning at my door. Hair still unwashed. Same wrinkled button down. He was gesturing wildly at the security guards, his voice carrying even through the closed windows. I couldn't hear the words, but I could hear the tone. Desperate, angry, unhinged. People were stopping to watch. Colleagues arriving for work, pausing with their coffee cups and briefcases to stare at the scene unfolding in the lobby. The morning rush. Probably 30 or 40 people witnessing Derek Harrison getting escorted out of my workplace by security. One guard took Derek's arm. Derek jerked away, said something sharp. The other guard moved closer and between the two of them they managed to guide him, forcibly, toward the exit. My phone buzzed. Text from Brian, who sat 2 desks over. Was that your fiancé who just got kicked out by security? Word would spread through the entire office within an hour. Probably less. Derek had crossed every professional boundary. Had shown up at my workplace, made a scene, gotten himself physically removed by security. All because ignoring him was working too well. I watched his car peel out of the parking lot, tires squealing slightly on the pavement. Then I sat back down at my desk and responded to Brian's text, ex-fiancé. And yes. That evening Jade showed up at my door unannounced with Chinese takeout and news. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me into the condo with bags of food. I have information. She set everything up on my coffee table. Lo mein, orange chicken, spring rolls, 2 forks. We sat on my couch, miso immediately claiming Jade's lap. Derek's been losing his mind, Jade said without preamble. He's calling everyone we know. Ashley Thompson texted me an hour ago. He showed up at her house last night. Ashley was one of our mutual friends from college. She'd been invited to the wedding. Had probably already received my cancellation notice. What did he want? Information about you. How you're doing. If you're seeing anyone. If she thought you'd ever take him back. Jade paused. Ashley told him to leave. But before he did, he told her everything. Everything. There was someone else, Lisa. Her name's Brittany. New sales associate at his company. 23 years old. I'd known on some level. Had suspected for months. But hearing it confirmed still felt like validation and betrayal all at once. When did it start? Ashley said around 8 months ago. Right when he started acting different. 8 months. The entire time I'd been planning our wedding, revising seating charts, choosing napkin colors, he'd been sleeping with a woman barely out of college. Here's the best part, Jade continued, and her expression was almost gleeful. It fizzled out the day after he sent you that text. Brittany wasn't interested in anything serious. He just wanted to have fun. When Derek told her he'd ended his engagement for her, that he was ready to commit, she completely freaked out. Told him she'd never agreed to anything like that. Cut things off immediately. Actually laughed. The sound came out sharp and bitter but genuine. So he blew up a 4-year relationship and a wedding for a 23-year-old who dumped him the next day? That's almost poetic. Ashley said he's completely devastated. Keeps saying you were the best thing in his life and he destroyed it for nothing. He lost you and Brittany within 24 hours and now he's spiraling. Good. I took a bite of lo mein. He should live with that. Jade raised her beer. To catastrophic misjudgment and facing consequences. We clinked bottles. The next 2 weeks turned into a siege I hadn't asked for but handled with the same methodical precision I applied to work projects. Flowers arrived at my office every single day. Monday roses. Tuesday lilies. Wednesday an enormous mixed arrangement that the receptionist accepted with an apologetic expression. What should I do with these? She asked. Donate them to the hospital down the street, I said. Every arrangement that comes. Don't even bring them up. You got it. By Friday the receptionist just waved at me when deliveries arrived, already reaching for her phone to call the hospital. The voicemails were worse. Derek left them from different numbers after I blocked each one. I'd listened to 30 seconds of each before deleting. Just enough to gauge his mental state, not enough to actually absorb the words. They started apologetic. I know I don't deserve your time, but please just hear me out. I made a terrible mistake and I'm begging you for a chance to explain. By the end of the first week they turned bitter. You're being cruel, Lisa. We were together 4 years. That deserves at least a conversation. You can't just erase someone from your life like this. Actually, I could. And I was. A 5-page handwritten letter appeared under my door one evening. I could see the first line through the envelope. My dearest Lisa, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but... I threw it away without opening it. Whatever he'd written, whatever explanation or justification he'd crafted, I didn't need to hear it. Our mutual friends started reaching out. Tentative texts asking if I was okay, if Derek had contacted me, if I wanted to talk about what happened. Most of them were genuinely concerned. A few were clearly fishing for gossip. Then his mother called. I didn't recognize the Connecticut number, so I answered. Lisa, this is Patricia Harrison. Her voice was cold, formal. I don't know what happened between you and Derek, but he's a complete mess. He says you won't even talk to him. That seems unnecessarily vindictive. Something in me snapped. Your son dumped me via text message on my birthday morning after months of cheating on me with a coworker. Then he showed up at my workplace and got escorted out by security. If he's a mess, that's because of choices he made. Not me. I hung up before she could respond. I changed my entire routine to avoid accidentally running into Derek. Different coffee shop, switched from Houndstooth to Flitch, even though it was further from my condo. Different grocery store. Started going to the Whole Foods on the north side instead of the H-E-B I'd always used. Different yoga studio. Different route to work. Not because I was afraid of seeing him, but because I refused to give him even accidental access to my life. Canceling the wedding turned out to be surprisingly straightforward. Michelle, the venue coordinator at Barton Creek, was sympathetic when I called. I need to cancel, I said simply. Oh honey, I'm so sorry. Can I ask what happened? He ended things. Via text. On my birthday. Jesus. A long pause. Hey. Listen, officially I'm supposed to tell you that the deposit is non-refundable. But between you and me, I'm going to process this as a venue-initiated cancellation due to unforeseen circumstances. You'll get your money back. Thank you. That's incredibly kind. Better now than after the wedding. Trust me, I've seen couples go through with it and regret it for decades. Most of the other vendors were equally understanding. The florist refunded my deposit immediately. The photographer did too. The DJ kept his deposit but sent a note saying he hoped I'd use his services for a better celebration someday. I sold my Vera Wang dress on Still White within 3 days. A woman named Maria from Houston bought it for 80% of what I'd paid. She sent me a message with her payment. I'm so sorry about what happened. I hope you find happiness. Her kindness from a complete stranger almost broke me more than anything Derek had done. I sent cancellation notices to all 150 guests. Kept it simple. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the October wedding has been called off. Thank you for your understanding. My mother called within an hour of receiving hers. What happened? She demanded. No, are you okay? No, I'm sorry. Just immediate concern for how this would affect her. Derek and I broke up. But why? What did you do? I didn't do anything, Mom. He ended it. Well, there must have been a reason. Men don't just end engagements for no reason. Were you pressuring him? Being too demanding about the wedding? I closed my eyes. I'm hanging up now. Lisa, wait, I already bought my dress. And I told everyone at book club about the wedding. Do you know how embarrassing this is? Goodbye, Mom. I hung up. Blocked her number too, at least temporarily. I was done managing other people's disappointment about my own heartbreak. Done explaining. Done justifying. Done being anything other than exactly what I needed to be in this moment. Someone who'd said, okay, and meant it. Derek had tried to destroy me with his cowardice. Instead, he'd destroyed himself. And I was just getting started. Getting started turned out to be easier than I'd expected. 6 weeks after the birthday text, I went on my first date since Derek. Not because I was looking for a relationship, but because staying frozen in place felt worse than taking a small risk. His name was Marcus Taylor. I'd met him 3 weeks earlier at a tech conference downtown. One of those industry events with panel discussions and networking mixers that I usually found exhausting. He'd approached me during a break between sessions, asked thoughtful questions about my project management approach, actually listened to my answers instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. We'd exchanged numbers. Texted casually over the next few weeks. Nothing heavy. Just easy conversation about work, about Austin, about the ridiculous heat wave we were having. When he asked me to drinks at Whistler's, I almost said no. Too soon. Not ready. Still healing. But something made me say yes. We met on a Thursday evening. I got there first, ordered a gin and tonic at the bar, tried not to feel nervous. This was just drinks. Low pressure. If it was terrible, I could leave after one drink. Marcus arrived exactly on time, which I appreciated. He was tall, maybe 6'1", with dark curly hair and glasses that somehow made him look approachable instead of nerdy. He smiled when he saw me, genuine and warm. Lise. Thanks for meeting me. Of course. Thanks for suggesting this place. I've been meaning to try it. We settled into bar seats, ordered a second round of drinks, and just talked. He told me about his work building security software for a startup even smaller than mine. About his terrible college band that had played ska covers at parties nobody wanted to attend. About his attempt to learn pottery at a community center that had resulted in a lopsided bowl his mother still displayed prominently on her mantle. She tells everyone I made it, he said, laughing. Like it's some precious artifact instead of proof that I have zero artistic ability. I laughed. Actually laughed, the kind that comes from genuine amusement instead of politeness. It felt good. Foreign, almost, after months of forced smiles and careful composure. What about you? He asked. Any hidden talents or spectacular failures you're willing to share? I told him about my work, about the challenging projects I was managing, about my boss who was tough but fair. I didn't mention Derek. Didn't mention the cancelled wedding or the birthday text or any of it. This date existed in a space separate from all that pain, and I wanted to keep it that way. Marcus asked follow-up questions about things I'd mentioned. Remembered details from our previous text conversations. Maintained eye contact like I was the only person in the room, not like he was scanning for someone better or more interesting. It felt normal. Healthy. Like remembering what genuine interest looks like when someone's actually present and engaged, not just performing attention while mentally planning their exit. We stayed at Whistler's for 3 hours. Ordered appetizers. Had another round of drinks. Talked about everything and nothing. Travel we wanted to do, podcasts we were obsessed with, the best tacos in Austin, a debate that could last hours in this city. When we finally left, Marcus walked me to my car. I had a really good time, he said. Would you want to do this again? Yeah, I said. I would. He smiled. Didn't try to kiss me, which I appreciated. Just said goodnight and waited until I was safely in my car before walking to his own. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't felt in almost a year. Hopeful. Jade noticed the change immediately. We were having coffee the following Sunday morning at our usual spot. Flitch, my new regular place. She was telling me about her girlfriend Kelly, about a trip they were planning to Marfa, when she stopped mid-sentence and just looked at me. What? I asked. You're glowing. I am not. You are. Like genuinely happy. I haven't seen you look like this in. He paused, calculating. God, maybe a year. More. I thought about it. I went on a date last week. Jade's eyebrows shot up. And you're just telling me now? Details. Immediately. I told her about Marcus. About drinks at Whistler's. About how easy the conversation had been, how normal everything felt. You seem lighter, Jade said when I finished. Like you're not carrying something heavy anymore. He was right. I felt lighter. The constant vigilance of monitoring Derek's moods. The walking on eggshells around his unexplained distance. The daily anxiety of wondering what I'd done wrong to deserve his withdrawal. All of it had lifted. I didn't realize how much energy I was spending trying to save something that was already dead, I said. Jade reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're not just surviving this. You're actually thriving. That's the best revenge. He was absolutely right. The best revenge wasn't confrontation or public exposure or trying to make Derek suffer. It was building a life so full and authentic that his absence became a relief instead of a wound. Every day I woke up without having to decode his silences or manage his moods felt like freedom. 3 months after the birthday text, I saw Derek one final time. Our mutual friend Sarah was getting married. Someone we'd both known since college. I debated not going. Didn't want the drama, didn't want the awkwardness, didn't want to give Derek any opportunity to approach me. But Sarah had been my friend first, had been there for me through the breakup, and I refused to let Derek's existence dictate my choices anymore. Marcus agreed to be my plus one. We arrived at the reception fashionably late. The ceremony was over, cocktail hour was ending, people were starting to find their seats for dinner. The venue was gorgeous. String lights everywhere, a live band setting up near the dance floor, that perfect golden hour light filtering through the windows. I wore red. Bold, striking, confident. A dress I'd bought specifically for this wedding after the breakup, when I'd decided I was done wearing colors Derek had preferred. We walked in together, Marcus's hand on the small of my back, and within 5 minutes I saw Derek. He was standing alone near the bar, no date, no group of friends around him. Just standing there holding a beer, staring at his phone like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. He looked terrible. Gaunt, like he'd lost 15 pounds. Dark circles under his eyes. That desperate, exhausted energy of someone who hadn't slept well in months. He looked up from his phone and our eyes met across the room. For a moment neither of us moved. Just locked in that mutual recognition, that acknowledgement of shared history and its complete destruction. Then Marcus returned from the bar with our drinks. A gin and tonic for me, a beer for him. He slid his hand back onto the small of my back, leaned down close to my ear. "That's a beautiful dress," he said. "Have I mentioned that yet?" I laughed, turning my full attention to him. "Only twice." "Well, it bears repeating." I glanced back toward where Derek had been standing. He was still there, frozen, watching us. Watching me be genuinely happy with someone else. Watching proof that I'd moved on completely while he was still trapped in the wreckage he'd created. His face crumpled. Just for a second, but I saw it. Then I turned back to Marcus, back to our conversation about the ridiculously elaborate cake Sarah had chosen, and I didn't look at Derek again. 20 minutes later, Sarah found me. "Hey, did you see Derek leave? He literally just walked out without saying goodbye to anyone. Didn't even stay for dinner." "I'm kind of annoyed, honestly." "Can't say I noticed," I said. Which was technically true. 4 months after the birthday text, my boss called me into her office on a Friday afternoon. "Close the door," Sarah said. My stomach dropped for a second. Had I messed something up? But she was smiling. "We're promoting you to senior project manager. 30% raise effective next month. We've been watching your performance, your leadership on the difficult projects, your ability to stay composed under pressure." She paused. "Whatever happened in your personal life this spring, you handled it with incredible grace. That's exactly the kind of person we want in leadership positions here." I thanked her, managed to keep my composure until I got back to my desk, then texted Jade immediately. "I got promoted." Her response was instantaneous. "Hell yes. Celebration drinks tonight. I'm buying." I used part of my first bigger paycheck to finish transforming the condo. Bought bold modern art from local Austin artists. Paintings with vivid colors that made me happy just looking at them. Filled every corner with plants until the place felt like a jungle. Replaced Derek's boring, practical furniture with pieces I actually loved. A velvet armchair in deep purple, a coffee table made from reclaimed wood, bookshelves that actually fit my style. Jade and Kelly started coming over for Sunday morning breakfast after the farmer's market. We'd buy fresh produce and flowers, cook elaborate brunch spreads, drink mimosas, laugh about everything and nothing. Marcus mentioned one evening that he'd tried pottery once and failed spectacularly. Something about the story, his self-deprecating humor, the image of him covered in clay, made me want to try it myself. I signed up for a beginner pottery class at a studio in South Austin. Went every Tuesday evening for 8 weeks. My first bowl was lopsided and ugly, with uneven walls and a base that wasn't quite centered. I loved it completely, because it was entirely mine. Made by my own imperfect hands. With no one's opinion or approval required. No one telling me it was too bold, or not practical, or that we should choose something more neutral. I brought that wonky bowl home and put it on my kitchen counter, right where I'd see it every morning when I made coffee. It sat there like a metaphor for everything I'd built in the months since Derek's birthday text. Imperfect, authentic, exactly what I needed. And every morning when I saw it, I smiled. That bowl became a symbol of something I hadn't fully understood until now. 6 months after the birthday text, I finally grasped what Derek's desperation had really been about. And it had nothing to do with losing me. It was about losing the version of himself my presence had allowed him to believe he was. The successful, put-together man who had everything figured out. The pharmaceutical sales director who could close deals and plan futures and orchestrate romantic beach proposals with mariachi bands. The guy who'd convinced a woman to rent an overpriced condo because, we'll be engaged soon anyway. The man who could make promises and have people believe them. Without me there as proof of his goodness, he had to face who he actually was. Someone who makes impulsive decisions based on fear and fleeting attraction. Someone who throws away 4 years for a 23-year-old coworker who wasn't even interested in anything serious. Someone who can't sit with discomfort or difficult conversations for 5 minutes without choosing the coward's way out. Someone who sends breakup texts on birthday mornings because facing another human being's pain is too hard. I'd been his moral validation. His proof that he was a good person doing the right things, building a good life, making good choices. And when I took that validation away, when I responded with, okay, and immediately erased him from my life, he lost his ability to lie to himself. That's why he showed up at my door on day 3, unwashed and desperate, holding grocery store carnations. That's why he got himself escorted out of my workplace by security. That's why he spiraled while I flourished. He needed me to fight for him. To beg. To cry. To validate that he was worth fighting for, that what we'd had was worth salvaging. My silence denied him that validation and he couldn't handle it. The irony was almost beautiful. The thing I'd come to understand about that birthday text was that it wasn't actually cruel. It was clarifying. Those 34 words revealed exactly who Derek was with perfect, devastating accuracy. A coward who'd rather blow up someone's life via text message than have one difficult conversation face to face. Someone who'd waste 4 years of another person's life because he was too weak to be honest when doubt crept in. Someone who'd let me book a venue, send save the dates to 150 people, buy a wedding dress, revise a seating chart 17 times, all while knowing he was already halfway out the door. The text itself wasn't the betrayal. It was just the final, undeniable confirmation of months of smaller betrayals I'd been rationalizing away. Every time he'd changed his password without telling me. Every time he'd left the room to take calls. Every time he'd claimed exhaustion instead of intimacy. Every time he'd chosen distance over honesty. Every time he'd made me feel crazy for noticing that something was wrong. The birthday timing hadn't been thoughtless or accidental. It had been his final act of control. His last attempt to devastate me so completely that I'd be too shattered to fight back, too humiliated to demand real answers, too broken to do anything except quietly disappear from his life. But it backfired spectacularly. Because instead of destroying me, it gave me perfect clarity about exactly who I was refusing to marry. It showed me the bullet I was dodging. It freed me from months of confusion and self-doubt and walking on eggshells. That text was the greatest gift Derek ever gave me, even though he'd meant it as an ending. 6 months later, my life looked nothing like the one I'd been planning. And it was better. So much better. I was still in my condo, the one I could now afford comfortably on my senior project manager salary. Miso had gotten significantly more affectionate since Derek left. She'd curl up in my lap during Netflix binges, purr loudly when I came home from work, sleep on my pillow at night. Turns out the cat had excellent instincts all along. My career was thriving in ways I hadn't anticipated. The promotion had come with new challenges. Leading a team of 5, managing bigger projects with higher stakes, representing our department in executive meetings. It was exactly the kind of work I'd always wanted to do but had somehow convinced myself I wasn't ready for. Sarah, my boss, pulled me aside one afternoon in October, what would have been my wedding month. "You know what I appreciate most about you," she said. "You don't just manage projects. You make everyone around you better. That's rare." The recognition felt genuine. Earned. Marcus was becoming someone real and steady in my life. We'd been seeing each other for 4 months now, slowly, carefully learning from past mistakes. He knew about Derek. About the birthday text. About the cancelled wedding and the 23-year-old coworker and all of it. His response had been perfect. "That guy's an idiot, but I'm grateful for his stupidity. I wouldn't have found you otherwise." We had actual conversations about feelings and expectations and what we both wanted. When something bothered him, he said it directly instead of withdrawing and making me guess. When I needed space to process something, he gave it without making me feel guilty. It felt revolutionary simply because it was healthy. We laughed about my terrible pottery. I'd made 3 more bowls since that first one, each marginally better but still obviously amateur. He'd started coming to my Tuesday evening classes, sitting at the wheel next to mine, both of us covered in clay and laughing at our complete lack of natural talent. We planned weekend trips to places I'd never been. Marfa, New Orleans, Colorado. Not because we were trying to create Instagram-perfect moments, but because we genuinely enjoyed exploring new places together. Sunday mornings had become my favorite time of the week. Jade and Kelly would come over after the farmer's market, bringing fresh flowers and produce. We'd cook elaborate brunches, frittatas with vegetables we'd just bought, fresh fruit salads, strong coffee, mimosas if we were feeling indulgent. We'd sit around my kitchen island, the one Derek had barely noticed when I'd agonized over choosing it, and talk about everything. Jade's work, Kelly's family, my pottery failures, Marcus's latest project at work, plans for the holidays. Nothing particularly profound. Just the comfortable intimacy of friends who genuinely cared about each other's lives. I'd painted another accent wall in my living room, deep teal this time. Jade had helped again, and we'd made it a whole event with wine and music and Miso supervising from the couch. "You know what I love about your place now?" Jade had said while we cleaned the paint rollers. "It actually looks like you. It never did before." He was right. The condo had transformed from a space I'd created to impress or please someone else into something that was genuinely, authentically mine. I'd even started learning guitar, badly, with more enthusiasm than skill. Marcus had an old acoustic he'd let me borrow, and I'd been teaching myself basic chords from YouTube videos. My neighbors probably hated me. My life wasn't perfect. I still had moments of doubt, of wondering if I should have tried harder to save the relationship with Derek, of questioning my own judgment. But those moments were getting rarer. And they were vastly outnumbered by moments of genuine contentment, of looking around my transformed condo with my wonky pottery and my teal accent wall and my thriving plants, and feeling deeply grateful for how everything had turned out. The real revenge, though I'd stopped thinking of it as revenge, was that I didn't need revenge at all. I just needed to mean that one-word response. To actually be okay. To build a life so full and vibrant and authentically mine that Derek's absence became a relief instead of a wound. While Derek spiraled, showing up at my door desperate and ashamed, getting escorted from my workplace by security, crying to mutual friends about his catastrophic mistake, losing both me and Brittany within 24 hours, I was getting promoted. Learning pottery. Laughing with Marcus. Building actual friendships. Creating a life I loved. That was the thing Derek would never escape. Every time he saw my LinkedIn updates showing my promotion to senior project manager. Every time he heard through mutual friends that I was doing well, that I was seeing someone, that I seemed genuinely happy. Every time he remembered that moment when he'd sent that birthday text expecting devastation and received one word in response, "Okay," followed by complete silence. He'd destroyed what we had, expecting me to crumble, and instead I'd built something infinitely better from the rubble. That's what he'd carry for the rest of his life. Not that I hated him. Not that I'd gotten some dramatic revenge. But that I'd simply moved on. Completely. Vaguely. Joyfully. And I wouldn't think about him at all. Except maybe occasionally on random Tuesday evenings while I was making wonky pottery bowls and laughing with Marcus about how terrible we both were at it, when I'd remember that cowardly birthday text and feel nothing but gratitude. Gratitude that Derek had shown me exactly who he was before I'd legally bound myself to him. Gratitude that his cowardice had freed me to find something real. Gratitude that I'd said, "Okay," and meant it. 6 months later, sitting in my transformed condo with Miso purring on my lap and my lopsided pottery bowl on the counter and Marcus in my kitchen making dinner while humming off-key, I understood something profound. Derek Harrison had tried to ruin my 30th birthday. Instead, he'd given me my life back. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.